The context of the Nigerian woman in urban communities is progressing, but across the board, the average Nigerian woman is living below the poverty line. On this special edition of Rubbing Minds, we're celebrating International Women's Month throughout the month of March. And today I'm going to be talking to two formidable First Ladies on the state of women's rights. We're going to be discussing the girl child and also her access to education. And we will also be discussing the issue of gender-based violence in our community. This special edition is powered by Lipton, and Lipton is raising a mug to her.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.
Welcome, Your Excellencies. Thank you for so much for sitting down and having this conversation with me. Happy International Women's Month.
And you too,
Thank you.
And it's great to be here.
You know, it's an interesting theme because this month is talking about choose to challenge. And throughout the month, we're doing different activities that we're asking, what exactly are our communities, our society, government doing to choose to challenge and also to advance the cause of women. Last year was a very hard year for us. It was a COVID year. And I want to go back and talk a little bit about the initiative that the Nigerian Governor's Wives Against Gender-Based Violence started. And I want to find out, what inspired you to come together to say, we're going to say no to gender-based violence. We can start with you, Erelu.
Thank you very much, Bolanle. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting us. As you just said, last year was a very difficult year, particularly difficult for women around the world. Here in Nigeria, because of the COVID-19 lockdowns, a lot of women and girls were trapped in their homes and in their communities with predators and violators. And every day we kept getting reports of one form of sexual violence attack against women and girls or the other. I believe it all came to a head when we heard of the news of the rape and murder of Uwela from Edo State, the student. And by that time, I think a lot of us were just fed up. And so I spoke to my colleagues and governors' wives, and we agreed that we need to do something. We need to speak up. And so the first thing we did was to put together a memo to our husbands at the Nigerian Governors Forum, demanding that they please declare a state of emergency against all forms of gender-based violence. Before then, we've been talking about it. Civil society organizations have been running campaigns trying to draw attention. But at that point, we felt that we needed to take some actions that were out of the ordinary. Thankfully, our husbands listened to us and the state of emergency was declared. And one of the things about that was the governors made a commitment that they would all go back to their respective states and speed up the passing of laws to protect women and children from violence. Right. And where laws were in place, they would ensure that there's political will to implement those laws. And since then, our network, Nigerian Governors' Wives Against Gender-Based Violence, has gone from strength to strength, and we continue to work on these issues at a national level and in our respective states.
Yeah, and I have to commend you because the truth about it is I think last year was a awakening for all of us that this is an issue that is not going away anytime soon if we don't address it head on. Dr. Bagdo, I want to go to you and talk about, what the VAP Act looks like, what the law looks like in your state. Because you and I have had a conversation about this, that sometimes you have to go around to pass an act that might not work exactly how we think of it should work in the South.
Well, the VAP Act is the same as all the other states, but there have been deliberations on it. It's been submitted to the State House of Assembly, and there have been various stakeholders that have come together to talk about what works and what doesn't work in our cultural and religious context. And all those adaptations have been taken into consideration. Also, the other important step that we've made is that the penal code, remember that there is a Nigerian penal code that exists in the northern part of Nigeria. It's a law that it was in existence for so many years, and a lot of them are quite outdated and archaic. So that has been updated too, and now it's going to be unified across all the states that practice that code, and there will be uniformity, which means that the penalty for rape in Kebbi is the same as the penalty for rape in Borno, and there's less confusion for the magistrates. The main thing that we've been able to do is to bring in the Council of Ulamas, who are the religious leaders that usually oppose the laws. But in this particular case, with the VAP Act, there is really no bone of contention, because the main thing they would think about is Islam says this and Islam says that, but it's not true. Most of it is their cultural ideas that people have translated into being a law and a religious law. And we have been able to get the ulamas, the big council of ulamas in the state, to speak to them and say that this is what the Quran says, this is what the Sharia law says, and this is how it should be done. And fantastically, Islam actually gives women a lot of rights that people do not realize. So we're very keen and eager to publicize these laws and the guidance of the council so that women will get to know their rights and do it in a way that is not offensive to the society. That doesn't mean that they should be victims, they should allow themselves to be victims. And of course, with the VAP Act, we're able to provide places of succor where they can go to and seek help or assistance if they're going through any form of violence.
And if there's one thing I believe we've been able to achieve in Ekiti State, is to be able to send a strong message that we will not tolerate these acts of impunity against women and girls. Of course, there's still a lot to be done.
Yeah.
Of course, we still get cases every day. But because people now know that there is a place they can go to, that they'll be listened to, that the government is taking this seriously, people are now coming forward with different kinds of cases. We have whistleblowers all over the place. So it seems as if these acts are working. And so political will is absolutely key.
And I think that it seems as there's been a great collaboration. I would like to show our viewers this video from the Nigerian Governor's Wives Against Gender-Based Violence. Take a look at this.
We promise to sensitize parents.
We promise to advocate for laws and policies against gender-based violence.
To work with religious and traditional leaders.
We promise to advocate for treatment, care and protection of gender-based violence survivors.
Let us all work together to eradicate gender-based violence in Nigeria. We promise to use our voices to demand for a society free of gender-based violence. Enough is enough.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.
All right, welcome back. You are still watching the International Women's Month special on Rubbing Minds. My name is Balanle Olukani, and I'm so glad because, you know, in that video, I've watched the entirety of it, and I can see that it's not just the two of you. It's a conglomerate of, you know, the governor's wives across the states. in terms of pulling everyone together, what's the process like in making sure that you're all on the same page, you know, when you're putting your agenda forward for the Nigerian Governors' Wives Against Gender-Based Violence? We all giggle. Because, and the reason why I ask that is because every state is at different places, and there are also different, you know, initiatives.
Okay, let me
need to be
take that,
passed.
and
So,
because Erelu she might be modest about
Yeah.
it. So, like she explained to you, we came together last year to start this forum formally.
Yeah.
Before that, the First Lady, Her Excellency Haji Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, had been doing a lot of advocacy around gender-based violence, and we had worked with her, but we did not have a formal group of us together. So when we came together as a group with Erelu as the chairperson, and as we all know, she is a leading expert in the field of gender-based violence, and Ekiti State is a state that is role model states for all of us, and we look to emulate how they have been able to deal with it under with their laws, and then of course under her guidance. There are so many times when I have to go to her on my WhatsApp and say, hey, look at this law, this is how they wrote it, and she will either say, oh, leave it, it's fine, let me run it by my AG and let me do this and do that. And that is helpful when you have somebody that knows what she is doing and is an expert in the field, and she can bring us all together. Of course, we're women, and there are times when, you know, the response is not equal across board. And also the other advantage of coming together as a group is that states like ours that have been quite reticent, or they're not as keen to pass these laws for various reasons, the Governors Forum were able to speak to all the governors without any exceptions, and the resolution was made and they issued a state of emergency. Now, we wrote a memo, but I'm sure that there was a lot of talk in the other room that got that going for us at the Governors Forum. So we do use that strength, and it helps us a lot.
you know, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because in your, you know, Governors' Wives Forum, the International Women's Day statement, there was a line that really stuck out to me, and I just want to go ahead and read it. And you know, you said that as a statement, you said that you will continue to remind your husbands of their obligations to women, to society, to security. What does that process look like when you're trying to remind, you know, to us, this is a governor, to us, this is someone that, you know, is in a position of authority, but these are your partners, your life partners. How do you remind them that, you know, honey, this law, it's very important? What does that process look like in terms of navigating and advocating for issues such as women's rights?
Right. Well, I could be theoretical about it, and I could be very practical.
Yeah.
I could be theoretical and say it is our responsibility, as spouses, to remind our husbands that there are certain things that need to be done to ensure that no one is left behind.
Right.
And the practical issues are, we are the ones, the spouses, who these families come to in Ekiti State. And you will remember when, when you were with us, people would literally bring their daughters to my office, even before taking them to the police station or to the hospital. They'll bring them to my office, insisting that they need to see me because they know that they will get justice. These issues land on our doorsteps. Every day we have to deal with these issues. Today we are giving out some support to survivors of gender-based violence across the country. That's one of the things we said we would do for International Women's Day.
Right.
And we, out of the 40 odd grants we are giving to these survivors across the country, at least 35 of them have to do with rape and sexual assault. They bring these directly to our doorstep. And so we believe that we have to let our husbands know that there's something that needs to be done at a systemic level. We can't keep dealing with the symptoms. By the time they show up, the damage is done. We need our husbands to ensure that there are laws in place. We need them to ensure that the laws are fully implemented with all the political will and resources that that requires. And we need to be able to hold meaningful conversations with communities so that they own the issue. There's only so much advocacy we can do on our own. But we need to engage communities. My sister, Her Excellency Kebbi, spoke about talking with the ulamas. We need to talk to religious leaders of all persuasions. We need to deal with traditional rulers. We need to deal with parents, with teachers, with everyone who has a stake in ensuring that we have communities and societies free of all forms of violence, so that they know that we will not become a country that tolerates rape and sexual assault as a culture or as a way of life. That should not be. And so as we mark International Women's Day with the hashtag choose to challenge, as Nigerian governors' wives, we choose to challenge gender-based violence. We choose to challenge all forms of discrimination against women and girls.
Wow, I think that's a perfect way to go on a quick break. This conversation continues. I am so glad to be here learning and also understanding exactly what it means to be in a position of authority and use it to advocate for the rights of women. I'm here with the First Lady of Ekiti State, Erelu Bisi-Fayemi, and the First Lady of Kebbi State, Dr. Zainab Shinkafi Bagudu. We'll be right back after this.
Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.
Welcome back to this special International Women's Day episode on Rubbing Minds. My name is Balanle. I want to start with you, Dr. Bagudu. I want to talk about the state of women's rights. You know, how would you rate the state of women's rights in Nigeria?
Well, it's not where we would like it to be. It's not, we're not in a country where women are at parity with their male counterparts, right from childhood into adulthood. We see the discrepancy in females that are in elective positions, females that are in government positions, and the affirmative action is nowhere near being met in Nigeria. The 35% that is recommended, I think we're currently at 6 or 8% in between that. So as you can well imagine, in the core northern states, it's even more difficult because we have to be practical and honest that the culture is different. And when in our previous conversation, when we spoke about helping each other, one of the things that is up to me as a leader, as a mother in my state, is to be practical and sensible. I cannot just come to the table or come to His Excellency the Governor and say, look, they've done this in Ekiti State, so we have to do it in Kebbi. You must contextualize what you're aiming for. So in as much as we would like to aim for a world where we have gender parity and equity, and the inequities, particularly in the development sectors, healthcare, education, that's a very important one, and empowerment. So all these, we would like to see it closed. There are programs that all the states engage in and push forward, but it is not where it should be. And that is why we use days like the International Women's Day today to highlight these inequities.
It's interesting because Dr. Bagudu mentioned, affirmative action. And I had an interesting conversation, and I want to get your thoughts on this, as a leader when it comes to advocating for women's rights, even outside of what you do as a governor's wife. Do you think affirmative action is important? Do you think it's something that should be pushed forward? And the reason why I say that is on one of the episodes that I've had this month, we had someone who felt like they believed as a woman, she said affirmative action is crippling to women. And I thought that was an interesting perspective. So based on your experience advocating for women's rights, what do you say about that?
Right, okay, I'll respond to that. But to take a step back to the question you started out with, where are we with regards to women's rights in Nigeria? Over the past 10 years, Nigeria has performed woefully on all indices that measure gender equality and women's empowerment. If you look at the figures that have come in from the World Bank, from UNDP, from the World Economic Forum, we are not doing well at all. And as Her Excellency Kebbi has said, in all the indices with political participation, with healthcare, with education and training, with economic empowerment, any kind of indices you want to use to measure, we have failed woefully. Now, when it comes to the issue of access to political participation and decision making, that is one area in which quite a number of African countries have been able to do very well. And it has made a difference in terms of the status of women in those countries and the capacity of those countries to push the agenda around gender equality and gender parity. If you take countries like South Africa, like Namibia, like Rwanda, like Uganda, and more recently, a couple of years ago, Kenya, these are countries who have used affirmative action and quotas to level the playing field. Here in Nigeria, we are supposedly the giant of Africa, and we have less than 5% of women in the National Assembly. There are some state houses of assembly in Nigeria where you have no woman at all. Granted, we have seen quite a number of women in public life across all sectors, the business sector, the academic sector, in politics and governance and so on. But that is such a tiny minority compared to the vast majority of women who will never have their voices heard. So affirmative action is critical. Affirmative action is key. What kind of democracy, what kind of governance will we say we are having if the door is shut on 50% of the population? And by the way, I hope people remember that Nigeria did not meet any of the original Millennium Development Goals. Now we have the Sustainable Development Goals. The rate at which we are going, we are not going to achieve most of those goals either by the year 2030. And most of that will be due to the fact that we are not paying enough attention to gender equality and women's empowerment.
We're going on a quick break. When we come back, Rubbing Minds continues.
Wanna get with you. Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.